In today's story, I want to share an experience that still lingers in my mind like a long evening echo. The kind of quiet, ordinary moment that unexpectedly turns into something emotionally heavy and unsettling. And it all began on a tired weekday night when I had just finished a long shift at work and felt the weight of exhaustion pressing gently on my shoulders while the sky outside dimmed into a deep blue twilight, and the city lights slowly began to glow across the streets like scattered reflections of distant stars. And all I wanted in that moment was a peaceful place to sit for a while and eat my dinner in silence before heading home. After leaving work, I drove toward a small roadside cafe that I had visited many times before. A humble little place with a warm yellow sign that flickered faintly against the evening air. And as I parked my car beneath a soft streetlight at the far corner of the lot, I felt a sense of relief because the parking area was calm and nearly empty, with only a few cars resting quietly near the edges, and the gentle hum of distant traffic blended with the faint rustle of leaves, swaying in the cool night breeze, creating a stillness that felt comforting and real, like the world had finally slowed down for a moment just for me. I stepped inside the cafe, ordered a simple meal, a warm sandwich, crispy fries, and a cold drink, and when I returned to my car with the takeout bag in my hands, I decided not to drive away immediately, but instead sit there inside the parked car, because sometimes those quiet few minutes of solitude between work and home feel like the only time you truly get to breathe and gather your thoughts. So I leaned back slightly in my seat, placed the food beside me, rolled the window down just enough to let the breeze in, and turned on a soft track of music that gently flowed through the car, like a calm river of sound. As I unwrapped my meal and took my first slow bite of the sandwich, I watched the empty parking lot stretch quietly around me, the streetlight above casting long shadows across the pavement, while the glow from the cafe windows spilled faintly onto the ground, and everything felt peaceful, uneventful, gentle, the kind of moment where nothing dramatic is supposed to happen, where life is simply still, where you can exist without interruption, unaware that within minutes that calm silence would be broken by the heavy presence of suspicion and misunderstanding. While I continued eating, taking slow bites and occasionally glancing at my phone, I noticed movement near the edge of the lot, and when I looked up, I saw a woman walking across the pavement with firm, rigid steps, her posture stiff and upright, her expression sharpened by a constant look of displeasure, as though the entire world existed to inconvenience her. And as she approached the area near my car, she didn't simply pass by or continue on her way. Instead, she came to a stop just a few steps from my window and stared inside my car, like someone examining a scene they believed didn't belong. Her gaze wasn't curious or casual, it was probing, suspicious, almost confrontational. And as she continued staring without saying a word, I slowly lowered my window and asked politely if everything was okay, hoping perhaps she needed help or directions, but instead she responded with a tense, demanding tone as she asked what I was doing there, her voice sharp against the quiet night air, as though sitting in a parked car with food somehow required justification. I explained calmly that I had just finished work, bought dinner from the cafe, and was simply sitting there to eat before heading home, gesturing toward the takeout bag and the food resting on the seat beside me. But instead of accepting that harmless explanation, she leaned closer, crossing her arms tightly over her chest, and said that people sitting in parked cars made the place feel unsafe, adding that people like you shouldn't be in the parking lot for too long, a phrase that carried an edge of judgment, bias, and unfounded authority. And it instantly created a tension in the air that felt uncomfortable and unfair. I tried to stay calm and respectful as I repeated that I wasn't doing anything wrong and would leave shortly, yet her expression hardened further as she insisted that she didn't trust people who sit in their cars like that, claiming she had seen strange things happen and that she wasn't going to take any risks. And before I could say anything else, she stepped back, pulled out her phone, and began dialing the police, pacing in front of my car as she spoke dramatically into the phone, describing me as a suspicious person sitting alone in a parked vehicle, as if that innocent moment somehow transformed into a threat in her imagination. Even though I knew I had done nothing wrong, hearing her voice describe me that way made my chest tighten slightly, because no matter how calm you try to be, the idea of the police arriving over something so small and harmless fills you with a quiet anxiety. And while I considered simply driving away, another part of me felt that leaving would make it look as though I had something to hide, so I decided to remain still, hands visible, food beside me, breathing slowly, while the night around me shifted from peaceful silence to an uneasy waiting. Minutes later, the darkness of the parking lot was suddenly washed in rolling blue and red reflections as a Police car entered the area and pulled up near my vehicle, and 2 officers stepped out, one appearing measured and observant while the other scanned the surroundings with alert attention. And before they could even approach me, the woman rushed toward them and pointed in my direction, telling them she believed I had been sitting there too long, and that something about me seemed suspicious. The first officer walked toward my window, his posture steady and professional, and I rolled the window down fully, keeping my hands visible while I explained in a calm, respectful tone that I had just finished work, bought food from the cafe, and decided to sit there for a few minutes to eat, before driving home, showing him the empty wrappers and drink beside me, so he could see exactly what I had been doing. And after looking at the food and listening carefully, his expression softened as he recognized that nothing was wrong. He asked politely for my ID, which I handed over without hesitation, and after a brief check he returned it, reassuring me that everything was fine, while the second officer casually looked around the interior of the car and nodded subtly to indicate there was no issue. But behind them, the woman continued to insist that I was suspicious simply because I had been sitting there quietly, repeating that people don't just sit in cars like that, as if simple stillness was some kind of offense. The officer turned to her with a firm but controlled tone, explaining that sitting in a parked car and eating was not against the law, and that I had every right to be there. And as he spoke those words, she seemed shocked and frustrated, as though the reality of the situation didn't align with the exaggerated story she had created in her mind. And instead of accepting that she was wrong, she simply frowned, muttered under her breath, and walked away angrily, without offering a single word of apology or acknowledgement of the trouble she had caused. The officers assured me once again that I wasn't in any trouble, and thanked me for remaining calm and cooperative before returning to their patrol car and driving away, leaving the parking lot silent once more. But the peaceful feeling that had existed earlier was gone, replaced instead by a lingering heaviness, the weight of being misunderstood, judged, and treated like a problem, when I had simply been a tired person sitting quietly in my car trying to eat dinner after a long day. I sat there for a few minutes afterward, staring through the windshield at the empty lot illuminated by the streetlight, thinking about how a moment meant for rest had turned into an unnecessary confrontation, and how someone's fear, assumptions, and need for control could so easily escalate a harmless situation into a stressful experience involving law enforcement. And that realization stayed with me as I finally started my engine, drove away slowly, and headed home through the quiet night streets, while the events replayed in my mind like a scene I never asked to be part of. When I reached home and closed the door behind me, I took a deep breath and realized how strangely unsettling the entire situation felt, not because of anything I had done, but because of how quickly ordinary moments can become complicated when someone chooses suspicion over understanding, judgment over patience, and fear over simple human awareness. And since that night, every time I pause in my car to rest for a moment or eat quietly before driving, there is always a small thought in the back of my mind, wondering whether someone might once again mistake peace for threat and stillness for danger. And that is what makes the experience unforgettable, not the confrontation itself, but the quiet realization that sometimes the most ordinary, harmless moments in life can be disrupted simply because someone refuses to see the humanity in others, and instead chooses to see only their own fear reflected back at them in situations that never deserved conflict in the first place.